This is the iPod Nano 2nd Gen Ultimate Repair Guide. In this video we're going to cover basically everything to do with the iPod Nano 2nd Gen. It's going to be a pretty in-depth, comprehensive guide, so I don't know, stay tuned if you want to learn how to fix it. First we'll start off by removing both the top and bottom plastics. Now when I do this I like to use just a box cutter knife. Usually an old blunt one will work the best, but I don't know, I generally stay away from those plastic opening tools or the Disassembly. They're just not thick enough. You can't really get in there and pry it up properly. I mean, yes, it might increase the risk of scratching it slightly, but you know, you're actually going to take it out in like a few seconds rather than just sitting there prying at it for like 5 minutes. You're never going to get anywhere with those plastic ones. So yeah, just as I'm doing in the video, just pry it up, get underneath, maybe like a couple of millimeters, I don't know. It's not that deep. With the top one, yeah, you want to get more like towards the middle. Stay away from where that button is, the hold switch or whatever. Yeah, pops out pretty easily. It's just held in there with a bit of tape, so nothing too serious, not glued or anything. Yeah. Now the next, yeah, there'll be 3 screws, one just at the bottom. That's the bigger one, if you're wondering. And then 2 smaller ones at the top. Just come straight out. And you want to grab your pair of flathead tweezers and just where that little gap is at the top, just remove it. Lift it up. Be careful of the flex cable, obviously, it's pretty thin. And the same with the headphone jack is what I'm doing here. Just stick it under that little nub, lift it up. It's got the flex on it. Yeah, get in and unclip it because that's where it connects to the motherboard. You want to just get in and clip it. Yeah, now to remove the actual iPod from the case, we're going to take that same flat pair of tweezers and just shove it straight in the bottom, in the side of the 30-pin connector. Yeah, and then you can just push. Now if you've got an expanded battery here, it's obviously not going to come out because that's a one-piece housing, and yeah, it's going to be putting quite a bit of pressure on the sides there. So I'll cover that later in the video. Stay tuned to the end if you want to see that. But for now, let's just continue taking it apart. Yeah, after the iPod's out, to remove the screen, it's just simply taped on pretty much again. So just take your box cutter tool, go in between the metal there and the screen itself. Obviously, it is a glass screen, so don't go try and bending it in half and stuff. You're gonna obviously snap it if you do that. That's not good. That is if it still works. In this case, I think this one was toast anyways. Yeah, and as you can see, like that silver bit, you want to keep that. That's part of the backlight that like reflects the light back onto the screen. So keep that intact. But that white bit, you don't need that. You just bin that. Taking the screen out of the motherboard, that little plastic, I don't know what you call it, the black thing. You gotta lift that up. Sometimes it comes out. If it does come out, you can put it back in, and I'll show a little clip of that at the end of the video as well, just in case you do stuff that up. Yeah, next we just want to lift that battery off the motherboard. It's just held in there with a bit of tape, so just put that tool in the back. Pry it up. Obviously don't puncture the battery. If you do that, it's going to be, well, not a fun time if there's a charge in it. Yeah, and as I'm doing in the video, just remove that frame piece as well. Now that's pretty much ready to have the battery removed. It is soldered on, so if you're going to have a soldering iron to replace the battery in this iPod. There's no other way to do it. Yeah, so if you don't have a soldering iron or you're not comfortable with that, you can't really do anything here. And now when it does come to the battery, what really matters is the thickness of the battery here. Since that is a single piece housing, if the battery expands the thickness of the motherboard assembly too much, it's not going to slide back in. And even if you do get it back in, like, there's an issue where you can have the actual chips like prying off the board as you're pushing it in, because they'll just catch on the click wheel metal bracket that's attached to the click wheel, yeah. And it won't slide in properly, and then when you go to plug it in, it'll say iPod not recognized or whatever, because you've pried off one of the chips. Obviously you want to avoid that. So if you are putting in an aftermarket battery and it is a bit thick like mine is here, I'll show you exactly what to do. If it's not too thick, or you don't think it looks too thick, you can obviously just put it straight in and it should work just fine. But here I'll show you what to do if it is a bit thick. Yeah, so on mine I just take off the tape, expose the BMS, that's the little circuit board on the bottom of the battery management system. Usually what happens on mine, sometimes the solder blobs are a bit too big, and there's just not enough space for the battery in there. Yeah, now coming over to the soldering iron here. Let's have a look. Yeah, you just simply want to put the soldering iron on the battery, on those two blobs where it connects to the BMS. Just sort of go over it, get the ball out. You can put some new solder on if you want, preferably leaded solder, other than the lead-free stuff that they usually use. Just works way better. Yeah, and then simply reassemble the battery. Remember using Captain tape so you don't short it out and everything. Yeah, Captain tape is it's a tape that the yellow stuff that they use in most electronics. It's pretty temperature resistant, non-conductive tape. It's pretty cheap. You can get it for like less than $5 on eBay or AliExpress or whatever. Yeah, it's pretty much a must-have if you're doing these sorts of repairs. You can't really get away without having that. Although if it's just a one-off, I don't know, probably good. You're not going to break anything. Yeah, you just want to make sure you've cut all of the positive and negative, really. Because if you do short those two out, obviously it's not going to be fun. It could start a fire or something, I don't know. Yeah, so just get that nice and flat. That's the whole point of this. So now bringing the motherboard back in. You just have to remove that battery, first of all. Yeah, pretty simple. Just grab the soldering iron, place it across those 3 solder balls where the battery connects, and it should just pull straight out, assuming they're all heated. Yep. And then you can just toss that battery out pretty much. It's no good. Dispose of it carefully, of course. I don't think you can just put those straight in the bin. Now, yeah, look at that. All that mess that's left behind. You can't solder on top of that, obviously. You gotta remove that. So just grab out your tweezers. Maybe like the pointed head ones usually work the best. And just scrape back and forth gently, like what I'm doing here. You obviously don't want to scrape too hard, otherwise you're gonna, rip one of the traces and just completely stuff up the whole board. So yeah, just move back and forth across those joints till all the black stuff's come out. It shouldn't take very long. It's not the most difficult thing in the world. Yeah, now we can just see that's all good, nice and clean. So now what we want to do is basically just re-tin those holes. So you can see here I'm putting a bit of flux on the holes. Just makes the solder flow a lot better, a lot easier. Doesn't oxidize as quick, which is, I want that. Yeah, so just 3 blobs on the holes. Yeah, now over to the battery itself. So if you couldn't tell already, the outermost leg is the black wire, negative. Middle one's red, the positive. And then the white is the innermost wire. That's so it can tell what level the battery is on. If you don't plug, obviously you have to plug all of them in. If you don't plug the white one in, it's not going to work. It's just going to think it's on 0 battery all the time. Might be a bit fiddly here, but just place your soldering iron on the hole. Yeah, and once you got the first one in, you're gonna have to use the tweezers to get the second and third wires in the holes, which is even more fiddly. I find if you how I've done it in the video, if you position the board so that the with the frame underneath, so it sort of lifts up those three holes, just like levitates them above the ground, sort of. So when you put the wires through the board, they have somewhere to go. Yeah, now that that's in, you can just simply click that frame back in. Clip straight on the sides. There's two like bits in the board where it sticks out. Put that battery in. Push down all the wires. You want to make sure it's all like nice and flush, so you don't have any issues when you're inserting the motherboard back in. Yeah, now obviously you have to clean up these three legs that are sticking out at the top. If you don't do that, it's simply not going to go back in, obviously. It's probably going to short on the case as well. Or even you can, yeah. I think I put a bit more tin on the legs before we cut them off, because sometimes it doesn't solder all the way when you just go straight through the other side. Now grabbing your snips, cutting them off, cut them as low as you can, basically, is what we're doing here. Yeah, remove any bits of wire or solder that fly on the board, because that could cause a short if you miss it. Yeah, now just grab the soldering iron and push those wires down so that they're flush. So they're not sticking up, they're not touching the case, or touching each other especially. You don't want that. It's obviously not going to turn on if they're touching. Yeah, so now, after that's done, obviously there's going to be quite a bit of flux just lying all over the board. Not even just from the stuff we put on earlier, but the solder itself has flux in it. Needs it to work pretty much, so yeah, just remove that. Bit of isopropyl alcohol, you should have that as well. That's pretty much a must have if you're doing iPod phone repairs or whatever. Like I said, I mean, yeah, you can get away with not having it if you're if this is just a one-off, but you know, it's not ideal. You would want to have it. So yeah, that's pretty much done now. Now putting the screen back on, or the new screen in this case, you gotta clip the black sort of, I don't know what you'd call that, the clip up on the screen connector to put the flex in on the LCD. And again, if you do manage to mess that up and it falls out, you can always clip it back in. It's not the hardest thing in the world. Yeah, and then putting that back into place. I think there are some holes in that back frame where the LCD can line up directly, I think. And now, before we put it back in, we want to put some Captain tape over the various parts in the just a bit over the screen, like what it had originally, and a bit over the solder joints that we've just done on the battery, so that they don't short out. If it's sticking sort of over the side, it might peel off when you put it back in, so you want to just get it on top. Yeah, this is Captain tape again. It shouldn't really matter if you do use regular tape, but I don't know, obviously if you're doing a lot of mobile repairs or iPod repairs or electronics repairs, just get the real thing. It's cheap and it works. Oh yeah, here we go. This is where I test it. I just plug it in to see if it works. If it did work, you should get an Apple logo at this point. The Apple logo sort of goes off as soon as you unplug it. The battery might just be flat, so you can obviously just leave it plugged in for a little bit, see if it charges up, whatever. But if after 15 minutes charging and you unplug it and the Apple logo goes off and it's obviously not holding a charge, most likely it's an issue with either the battery or the way you've soldered the battery. So If you have a multimeter, I would measure those solder joints that you've done there on the positive and negatives. If you do get a voltage, it's probably something to do with the white lead. If you don't get a voltage, it's the battery itself, most likely. It could always be either the BMS itself is faulty, it could be those two solder joints we did earlier on the battery through the BMS. I don't know, just troubleshoot it. Or if you're not getting an Apple logo at all when you plug it in, that means it's actually a logic board issue itself. It wasn't the battery. So that's the thing, you have to watch out for that. So, especially if you've got like water damage signs on the board as well. That's, yeah, probably at that stage I would consider the board toast. If the water damage is like obvious, and you know you can directly see the component that needs to be switched out, I mean you can give it a go, but generally with these iPods they're pretty cheap to buy, just a used one or a broken one or whatever. So at that stage I would consider just buying another dud, just using the board from that. It's usually easier than, well, because we don't have schematics for these types of iPods either. So even if you do have water damage, even if you do have the equipment to fix it, it's never going to be worth the time actually, going at it, resoldering a chip, or it's going to be hard to figure out what's actually wrong with it. Might as well just get a new board at that point. Yeah, as we can see, it's turning on here as the camera has a spasm. Now putting it back in, you should just simply slide back in here if we've done it all right. If it is stopping at multiple points along the board, maybe just double check that battery thickness, because if you do just force it in straight up, you can rip chips off the board. That flex on the LCD, there are some little SMDs underneath that are attached to that flex. If the LCD isn't positioned correctly, you can rip those off as well, or if the battery is too thick. So you do want to watch out for that, because I don't know, the LCDs aren't that expensive, but you obviously don't want to go breaking them. Push the screen in. You can see that black foam around the iPod. It stuffs up on the first attempt. That can happen quite often, to be honest, where that black foam just peels up into the display where the pixels are. So if that happens, just take it out and just remove that foam, as I show in the video with the tweezers. I mean, it's not going to happen every time. It only happens a few times, but it's easy to fix, easy enough. You might just want to remove that foam anyway. Sometimes that foam can leave like marks on the plastic when you're putting it in, on like that front plastic cover on the housing. So you might just want to remove that foam anyways, just all the time. It doesn't really serve any functional purpose, you don't really need it. Yeah, so here we go. It now slides back in. Yeah, just line up the caps and tape. It might screech a little bit, it's normal. Yeah, as you can see, it does get stuck at the end. Where it gets stuck here, it's actually that metal covering at the bottom is getting caught on the headphone jack on the logic board. So what you want to do is just put your flathead tweezers in the bottom in that 30-pin connector and just push up. You'll hear a little click when it goes up. It should simply just slide straight in after that. There we go. And also you want to watch the flex on the click wheel at the bottom. Sometimes that can get caught on the logic board and it can bend out, sort of thing, and you won't be able to. It won't align properly with the connector on the board. You'll have to realign the logic board again. And sometimes if you do force it when that happens, you can snap the ribbon cable off of the housing. If you end up doing that, you'd have to just trash the ribbon cable, probably buy a new click wheel. Yeah, you want to push the iPod up against the edge of the table with like a screwdriver or whatever. You want to get it fully into the housing. If it's sticking up even just a little bit, it's not going to work properly. you're not going to be able to line up the click wheel flex with the logic board. Another trick you can use is, if it isn't entirely in, you can just take the bottom screw and screw that in. Before you've put the headphone jack back in, you just screw it and it'll pull the logic board towards the bottom of the case. That usually works as well. Or even just doing top screws. Yeah, so now just, as you can see, I've just tested the buttons and everything. You can also test the headphone jack and the lock switch at this stage, just before you screw it all back together. Waste all your time. It's a good idea. Yeah, so now just putting all those screws back in. Now when it comes to the top and bottom plastics, these are, well, sometimes you don't even need to put new adhesive on them. Sometimes you can just simply reattach them if the original adhesive still exists if you want. But for the sake of completeness, for the sake of this video, we're going to remove them and install new, just double-sided tape really. You can use any double-sided tape for these, it's not really important, it's not like it's an LCD or anything, but we will be using the good stuff, the black 3M. That's the best double-sided tape you can use for any of these phone repairs, iPod repairs, electronics repairs. That's the stuff you want. The black 3M. It's more expensive. It costs maybe like $15 a roll, but you know, it's gonna up your quality by that much. It's worth getting a roll of it. It lasts for ages as well. I've been on mine for like easily over a year now, maybe close to 2 years, and I've fixed probably over 1,000 devices just off of one roll. So yeah, definitely a good investment there. And put that back in. And now when we do put this back in, you got to make sure that the switch on the plastic and the switch on the iPod is in the same position. Because if it's not, it's obviously not going to line up and it's not going to function. So just make sure you've done that. Now for the bottom plastic, similar process. Just removing the old one first. If it should just pull off straight up, but if there is any residual, you can use the isopropyl alcohol. Yeah, and what we want to do here, just grab a box cutter knife, take two slits down the 30 pin. After you've cut it, of course, got it flush. Yeah, but 2 slits down the side of the 30 pin, and then, as I'm doing in the video, get your tweezers, grab at either end of the tape where it is still attached. Pretty straightforward. It should just rip straight off. And then in the headphone jack as well, starting at the innermost side and then pulling sort of out to remove it. Should be pretty easy. Then as we remove that side of the tape on the bottom, it will expose any overhanging bits, and you can just use the tweezers again to sort of pull it back and get it out of the way of where the actual connection will be. Yeah, so the only thing about this bottom piece is you just don't want to get any of the adhesive in the actual ports themselves, because if you get it in particularly the headphone jack, you can have, you know, it won't work. It can block the connection and you can only have audio out of one ear, or so obviously we don't want that. Just pull it out of the way, make sure the port is free. And yeah. And yeah, now at this point, you're pretty much done. It's just a matter of giving the iPod a wipe down with some isopropyl alcohol, just to give it that final clean. And yeah, although that's not the end of the tutorial, as there is some few more steps that I wanted to cover, including dead buttons. Sometimes the buttons stop clicking, It's usually due to corrosion under the buttons, which is a really easy fix. So yeah, I want to just cover that quickly, as well as replacing the front screen if that happens to be cracked. Not the LCD, but just the plastic itself. So yeah, let's take a look at that. So starting off, you just want to get your heat gun out, apply some heat to the front of the housing, as I'm doing here, just around where the screen is. Now it's just held in with the adhesive, so yeah, it comes out pretty easily. But yeah, you just want to go over it with the heat gun a little bit. Now the buttons are held in with a bit stronger of an adhesive, but it still comes out relatively easily. Just heat it up maybe to the point where it's just too hot, just hot enough where you can touch it still. And then I think I spray some isopropyl alcohol in there as well, just to weaken the adhesive that little bit extra. Yep, there we go. And then yeah, just push down. And now at this stage you want to be careful about that flex cable that's attached to the buttons as well, because that also attaches to the housing. And on that flex cable there's actually a chip, so you want to be careful of that, because you can accidentally bend that chip off of the flex cable, and yeah, if you do that it's obviously not going to work. So yeah, you want to avoid that. And yeah, now to clean the actual buttons themselves, you just have to lift over that tape sort of thing that covers over the buttons, and yeah, you'll see here, yeah, that's the corrosion under there, that green stuff. That's what's preventing it from clicking, preventing it from making proper contact. So yeah, to clean that off, just basically get out your tweezers, give it a scrape back and forth, as I'm doing in the video here, and yeah, you should be able to get it off pretty easily. Obviously don't scrape too hard, you don't want to rip the traces. Yeah, but if it's corroded to the point where the traces are like not visible or completely ripped off, then it may not work. And if that is the case, then you'll probably just have to buy a whole new click wheel. Although they're not too expensive, you can get them off AliExpress probably for like $5 or something like that. So if you really have to, you can do that. Although just cleaning it's usually pretty effective. Usually works 99 times out of 100. Yeah. As you can see there, that's what it looks like when it's clean. And now doing the same for or do it for all the buttons, really. I know I only showed doing it for one of them and for the center button as well, but yeah, if one of them's corroded, chances are probably all of them will be corroded, so while you've got it open, you might as well just scrape down all of them. And also remember to scrape the metal dome part as well. Sometimes there can be some corrosion there as well. And yeah, just wiping it with isopropyl alcohol after that, with the cotton bud like I'm using in the video. And yeah, after you've done that, the buttons should click perfectly fine. I would recommend testing it outside of the housing before you put it back in though. So you can just simply plug it into the logic board and test it like that. Yeah, now on this metal frame piece here, just cleaning off all the old adhesive, just using some isopropyl alcohol. You want to get it as thin as possible, so yeah, really try and get it all off. And it's also worth noting that those little black plastic dots on this piece, you want to try keeping those intact, because those actually press up against the back of the buttons. and if you do accidentally scrape one off, the button may not click properly, so yeah. Oh, I found that out by accidentally pushing one off once, and then when I reassembled the iPod, the button just didn't click. I think I ended up just salvaging one out of another dead iPod, and that ended up fixing it. Although, yeah, try and avoid it if you can. Yep, that's what it looks like when it's clean. And now, just applying some new adhesive. Again, I'm using that black 3M double-sided adhesive. I find that that's just the best one. And now, yep, just cutting it flush. Reseating those buttons back in, and then testing if they are all aligned in the right spot and that they click properly. I think there's some grooves for the home button. And yeah, so here I've salvaged another plastic front piece out of another iPod, and I've pre-applied some adhesive, so just peeling that off now. And that simply just goes back in the housing. You want to make sure that there's no adhesive or plastic left over from the old one that you removed earlier, because it might prevent the new one from fitting in there properly. And yeah, you want to get it in place as much as you can, and use the tweezers pushing from behind to really clip it into place, because you can't really use your fingers since it's a single piece unibody aluminium housing. You have to use the tweezers from behind, as I'm sort of doing in the video, and doing it for the click wheel as well. Just removing the adhesive and pressing it in from behind with the tweezers. Yeah. Yeah, and you want to try and get it as flush as you possibly can here, because if not, the logic board won't fit in properly when you try putting it back in later, since there's not that much space in the iPod itself. Yeah, now as I mentioned earlier in the video, this is what you can do if you have an expanded battery. So yeah, just take that ISSMO, stick it in the top there, in between the front plastic and the LCD. Yeah, if your LCD is already broken, then you don't have to be too careful, but if it's still good, just be a bit extra careful here, because you can get it out without damaging the LCD and have it still work properly. Yeah, and the reason we put the ISSMO in the top is just to sort of move the housing out of the way of some of the components on the motherboard, which might be preventing it from coming out when the battery is expanded. Yeah, as the expanded battery puts extra pressure on some of those components, and they might be hitting up against the frame of the housing. So yeah, as you can see, we got it out here. And yeah, in the case of an extremely expanded battery like this one here, you can just try and use the vise and just smack it with a hammer. It may not always work, but at that stage you're just trying to get whatever you can out of it, you know. You may get an LCD, you may get the entire motherboard assembly, but yeah, I think the one in the video didn't end up working at all. It didn't come out, it was too expanded. But yeah, you may end up damaging like the 30 pin or something. In the process, you may end up breaking the LCD. If it's not already broken, I don't know. But when they get extremely expanded, there's not much you can do really. It's just a matter of trying to salvage whatever you possibly can. So yeah, don't get too disappointed if it breaks. And now moving on to that LCD connector. If you did manage to break it earlier when you uninstalled the LCD or whatever, don't worry, because it does simply just go back in, assuming you didn't snap it in half or anything. Just make sure you've got that Omron logo facing up, and then yeah, just pushing it in, really. You want to make it stand up like vertically, yeah, and then just pushing it in, as I've done in the video here. And yeah, now that's pretty much it for this one. I know it's been a long one, nearly 40 minutes long, but I just wanted to cover everything. All the issues you may run into, all those little tips and tricks that, I don't know, most tutorials probably wouldn't cover, but I just wanted to be really thorough and in-depth here. As, you know, I've fixed quite a few of these at this point now, and I've picked up a lot of these additional tips and tricks you may not have learnt if you've just fixed one or two, but yeah, so I kind of wanted to share all that. Yeah, so if you enjoyed the video, I'll probably have some more of these coming out, probably for all the other iPod models that I've been fixing over the past few years. And yeah, if you don't want to fix one yourself, if you want to just buy one that I've already fixed, you can do that by heading over to partspluspods.com.au, either there or on my eBay store at Parts Plus Pods. Yeah, I have some for sale. Although it is, keep in mind, it's Australia only postage. So, but yeah, if you like the video, give it a like, give it a subscribe to the channel. Maybe check me out on Library. It's like a decentralized peer-to-peer YouTube alternative. It's pretty cool, worth checking out. And yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. Hopefully see you next time. Bye.